Hello, welcome to Couples Reconnecting Post-Deployment. This is presented by the Halifax and Region Military Family Resource Center. And this workshop series will be presented through 4 videos. And this is part 1 of 4, where we're going to talk about introducing the concepts around deployments and how they affect relationships. I am Mara Toombs. I'm a social worker on the Halifax and Region MFRC Mental Health and Wellbeing team. I'll be your host for the first of the 4 recordings. The second video, after you finish this one, and I encourage you to go on to the next video, my colleague Elizabeth Thomas will explore with you how understanding of principles of attachment can help deepen and repair connection between you and your partner. These videos are designed to be watched by you and your partner, and if that's not possible, there's still value in watching them on your own, but we would recommend if there's a time where you can sit down together and watch them, then that can be helpful. And we recommend that you check in with yourself and with your partner to see if this feels like a good time to do this process, and recommend also that you find a pen and paper so you can write some notes, and feel free to pause the video at any time to think about, journal about, or discuss with your partner how these concepts actually affect you and how they show up for you and what might be helpful. And we'll have times where we specifically recommend on the video that you pause, so you can wait for those too if you'd like. Here we go. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. We are all treaty people. So as I said, this is a series of 4 videos. In this first workshop section, in this video, we're going to be reviewing the cycle of deployment. We'll be discussing some common ways deployments can influence relationships, and also present some relationship scenarios to help you think about where you might be on a continuum of couples at this time. In this video, we will be talking about deployment reminders and some concepts like that, some of which might be familiar, and sometimes it's helpful still to touch in with them, and some might be new. In the second video, Elizabeth will be speaking about couples connection and attachment. And as we go along, we want to take time together to recognize what is working within your relationships. This is not just about things that are difficult. This is also about what is working that can be honored, deepened, or just noticed. In this series, we're going to introduce you to some of the work of the Gottman Institute in the form of connection builders. So there'll be a concept called connection builders that we will go into as we go along. The final session, Elizabeth will join us again, and she'll be exploring conflict strategies for repairs and encouraging you to think about what you've learned and how you can use it for future deployments. And she'll also be touching in on resources that exist that can be a helpful support. So as I said, this session focuses on talking about deployments and relationships, and this is going to be education form, not counseling. So if that's something you want to explore, more counseling, then at the end of the 4th video, there'll be information about how to access that. And we believe you know yourself best and what is best for you. And that might be different from what is best for someone else. So we invite you to really question and explore this information that we're presenting and see what makes sense for you and if it fits. So here we go. We are going to explore the cycle of deployment. So this is called the common family adaptation model, but it's also referred more often to as the cycle of deployment. This might look familiar to you. This slide shows the different stages of the deployment cycle, although each person has their own experience of deployment. Families do report some similarities, and that's what's captured here. Just prior to deployment, if we look over here on the far left, that's where we're starting in the timeline of a deployment. Going into the first bump is the first phase, which you can see is where stress levels are starting to increase, going from green to yellow, and they may stay elevated during the pre-deployment and deployment experience. This is normal, adaptive, and expected. During stage 1, which is referred to here as anticipation of loss, you may recall there was a sense of impending loss, getting ready for the departure. People are busy getting their affairs in order, possibly sleep and appetite is disrupted. Maybe you're feeling a bit anxious or resentful, and feelings of frustration and impatience are common. That brings you into stage 2, where a lot of families experience detachment and withdrawal. This is happening closest to departure. You may have experienced reduced sexual and emotional intimacy. That's quite normal. Couples report that they seem more impatient and they find themselves bickering and arguing over things that don't normally cause them to disagree. Again, this is common and makes sense because it's easier to say goodbye when you have more space between you. You've already created some emotional distance. Stage 3 is characterized by emotional disorganization. Your loved one has left, or if you're the one who has deployed, then you have left. Old routines have been disrupted and new ones have not yet been established. Your loved one who is deployed might be wondering if things back home are okay while they're trying to focus on their job. And if you're the one at home, you might be wondering how you're going to get through the next couple of months. That brings us into stage 4, recovery and stabilization. This is where we find a lot of families have settled into a routine. You might be finding your stride if you're deployed, and at home also things are beginning to feel manageable. Stage 5 is anticipation of homecoming. This is often a time of increased energy, activity, sleep and appetite disruption. Feelings can be excitement, anticipation, anxiety, impatience. People are feeling like they want to hurry up and get home and be together. And then we find often stage 6 kicks in with a time of renegotiation of relationships. So it's normal that there's some difficulty reestablishing intimacy in intimate relationships. There could also be difficulty reestablishing emotional intimacy within other relationships that the deployed member is involved in, such as parenting, relationships with children with parents, friends, coworkers. All these connections can feel a little rocky. There may be feelings of excitement, disorganization, resentment, frustration, even some grieving over loss of freedom and independence that may have occurred during the deployment. This stage is wonderful and challenging all at once. And sometimes that's deepened by a feeling that people want it to be all wonderful. But then we find that we settle into this stage 7, which is reintegration and stabilization. And that's usually around 6 to 12 weeks after the end of a deployment, when families get back to routines, feeling together again, feeling intimacy and closeness, confidence in relationships is often returning. So that's our model. And now we want to ask ourselves, how did the deployment influence you as a couple? Did you see yourselves in this description? How do you negotiate these stages of the cycle of deployment? Thinking about the way you as a couple negotiate these stages has a lot to do with understanding the impact that deployment has on your relationship and also learning to manage it. So separation stress increases a couple's sense of threat and uncertainty and increases the need for safe connection and reconnection. This is really a bigger picture statement about what deployment is doing on an emotional level, right? It's creating a sense of threat and uncertainty because you're apart. Whenever we're apart, couples in any situation where they're apart, there's going to be an increased need for safe connection and reconnection for your attachment. There are uncertainties in the pre-deployment and deployment phases where both you wonder how you both may be changed by the deployment and how you will maintain your sense of connection. Deployment-related changes in roles, responsibilities, daily routines, and activities can lead naturally to tension and cause couples to feel out of sync with each other. Couples may also experience a sense of personal growth and satisfaction as they adapt to changes in their lives and experience periods with little or no interpersonal connection. Workshops like this one can provide couples with tools to foster this growth and reduce conflict and enjoy positive and supportive time together, even when they are apart. So some of our intention here is to really notice what is good and healthy and positive and helpful that is arising out of a deployment, and how can you use that in a way to help you grow as a couple together. Some aspects of the deployment experience may promote your personal and emotional growth and help you grow closer together. Others may be more difficult and challenging. You may have days when you feel out of sync and overwhelmed or in conflict with each other. This can happen when we have disagreements or when you are particularly worried about one another. Keep in mind, this is normal and it happens with most couples, whether they're in the military service or not. The deployments will likely continue to influence your relationship, and let's look at where you are on the deployment continuum. So here are some helpful reminders to consider when you are connecting after a deployment. Following high stress situations and significant losses related to deployment, family members may react strongly to things that remind them of their loss. These reminders or triggers can be anything that the person associates with the loss: sound, smell, a particular subject of conversation, a picture, a time of day. They can result in sudden shifts of mood and behavior by members of the family. So deployment reminders are inevitable in some way. Whenever we go through a challenging time, there are things that stick with us and can be sort of triggers for us. So this is a list of tips for managing these reminders. First of all, increasing your awareness of them, opening up some conversation about what they are, how you're being affected by things, so that you can take care of each other in this way. Allow for timeouts. If someone's overwhelmed, it's okay to go and calm down and take some space and then re-enter the situation and talk about it. Access support of others. So this could be your family community, your military community, this could be the MFRC, this could be a counselor. Accessing the supports that are available to help you manage those reminders can take the pressure off of you as a couple. Use positive self-talk. So really honoring our own experience and talking to ourselves in as much of a supportive way as possible. Practice relaxation. So of course, this can be a really good time for anything that decreases stress. So figuring out what are those things that help you to relax. What does self-care mean for you? That could be making sure that you're not dropping your activities that you do outside of the family, and things that are your places you go to relax when you are apart. So this is a moment when you could pause the video and check in with each other about recognizing some deployment reminders that you have, or if you're on your own, it could be a time to jot some down. Is there anything that comes to mind for you when you think of the term deployment reminders? Next, we're going to jump into talking about some scenarios. So if you paused and you're back, then welcome back. Now we're going to describe some scenarios for how can we identify where we are on a relationship continuum. These scenarios represent the relationship continuum. I'll read through them and encourage you to think about what feels familiar. So scenario 1 over here in the green side of the page, we've got more good days than challenging days. Able to talk to each other about what family routines are the priority. Starting to feel things are moving forward for each of you, and you're able to share that with each other. Feeling more in sync and starting to feel a connection with each other. And then here in the middle in yellow, we've got more challenging days than good days. Bumping heads about what the new normal will be when discussing family routines and goals. Spending some time together, but there seem to be disagreements about a lot of things, and we don't feel like we've found our stride. Scenario 3 is characterized over here in the orange by arguing about a lot of things. Sometimes it feels easier to ignore the problem than to fall into a fight. We do not want to spend much time together, even though we're in the same house. Sometimes we find when we try to talk, it ends up in a misunderstanding, and we're wondering if we can ever get on the same page. So take a minute to read over the descriptions on the screen here. You can see, again, this is the continuum, but instead of the scenarios, we have some descriptors like what characterizes these different parts of the continuum. We've got under healthy, we've got equality, respect, trust, communication, and safety. Over here in a struggling situation, we might feel pressure, dishonesty, lack of communication. If things are tipping over into orange and they're feeling more unhealthy, we might be experiencing guilt and shame, manipulation, isolation. And then in the red end, where things are really actually tipping over into being abusive, or they're fully in an abusive mode, then we experience control, volatility, and violence. So I'm going to talk through a little bit more about these scenarios, and I'm going to ask you to think about the past month and decide what scenario speaks to you and where you are on the continuum. And if you're with your partner, this might be a good time to think on your own about which one it is, and then reflect together and see if you're seeing it the same way. So connected, over here in the green to yellow spectrum, you're going to find you've got more good days than challenging days. You're able to talk to each other about family matters and agree on how to settle them. starting to feel things are moving forward for each of you and you can share that with each other. Feeling more in sync, although together physically, you're starting to feel a deeper sense of connection than that. Over here in yellow merging into orange, maybe there's some disconnection. That might be characterized by there being more challenging days than good days, bumping heads about what to say when we talk, calls and emails and texts feel like there's unfinished business or the other person isn't understanding. You haven't found your stride and feel a bit out of step with each other maybe. Then when we get into the orange side and the disconnected end of the spectrum, that might sound like we're arguing about a lot of things. Sometimes it's easier to ignore the problems than to fall into an argument. We do not spend much time or effort to reach out to one another. And most times when we try to talk or connect, it ends up in a misunderstanding and we're wondering if we can ever get on the same page. And then in the red side of things, this is more of an intense situation. And I'm going to encourage you, if you feel like you've tipped over into the red or you're fully in the red, then it's a really good time to reach out for some external help. You may want to reach out to external help anywhere on this spectrum. Help can be really useful, but I just want to particularly emphasize it with if you're feeling like you're past the orange. So where are you on the deployment relationship continuum? There seems to be a continuum for everything, especially in this military culture. We really like a continuum. And there's a reason. It's a useful tool for gauging where we are and communicating with each other what our experience is. So there seems to be a continuum for everything, but in this case, this one feels particularly relevant to the cycle of deployment as a tool to be able to say, oh, I feel like we're going from yellow into orange, or I feel like we're heading into green. So as a check-in, that can be really helpful. The content of the next 3 videos of this workshop series can enhance your strategies for staying connected while apart and coming back together when you reintegrate, and moving from on the continuum over towards the green if you find that you aren't in the green right now. So this can be a time to check in with your partner and talk about where you are on the reintegration continuum as we wrap up this video. And this concludes part 1 of 4, Introduction to Deployments and Relationships. And please check into part number 2 to hear from my colleague Elizabeth Thomas discussing attachment and how we can improve our connection with our partner, first by understanding attachment patterns. Take care and enjoy.